What if I told you that the wildest stories in history, unicorns, sea monsters, death rays, even lost cities, were never pure fantasy but misunderstood facts? You'd probably say I've been watching too many Netflix documentaries, but stay with me because the things you thought were myths might just be history with a dash of drama. Before we begin, if you're the kind of person who loves strange, mysterious stories so unbelievable they make you shout "no way," then hit that subscribe button. History's about to get weird in the best possible way. 1. The real unicorn. If you imagine unicorns as gentle white horses that sparkle rainbows and spread magic, it's time for a reality check. Unicorns were real, only they weighed 4 tons, were covered in thick hair, and if one charged at you, the only thing flying would be you. Scientists call it Elasmotherium sibericum, or the Siberian unicorn. It was a massive prehistoric relative of the rhinoceros, roaming the icy plains of Central Asia tens of thousands of years ago. Its single horn jutted from its forehead, convincing early humans they were witnessing a creature of legend. Picture it. Heavy fog rolling in, and out of the mist, a shaggy beast the size of a bus thundering toward you. Would you shout unicorn or run? Over time, the story evolved. Less mud, more magic. And that's how a grumpy, horned rhino turned into a graceful creature of purity and wishes. When fossils were later discovered in Kazakhstan and Siberia, scientists realized the legend was just the truth, color-corrected for storytelling. The unicorn is the perfect reminder of how humans tell stories. We see something real, then add a little sparkle. The unicorn never lied. It was simply overmarketed. And if the most beloved mythical creature once walked the earth, who knows what else might still be hiding beneath the waves? Because next, we're talking about the monster that made an entire crew believe the ocean could eat ships. 2. The Kraken, the monster that wasn't fiction. What if I told you there was once a sea creature so massive it made an entire crew scream in terror and quit sailing for good? You'd probably laugh and say sounds like another drunk sailor story. But this time they weren't drunk. They really saw something. Legends said the Kraken was so huge that sailors mistook it for an island. Its tentacles, long as ship masts, could wrap around a vessel and drag it into the deep. For sailors, it was a nightmare. For everyone else, it was a fantasy. Then science came along and said, well, this one might actually be real. Turns out there really is a giant squid, stretching more than 12 meters long and weighing close to a ton, with eyes the size of dinner plates and tentacles strong enough to snap an oar in half. Imagine you're in the 17th century, rowing a fragile wooden boat, and a bus-sized shadow rises from the dark water beneath you. Would you tell people I saw a squid, or that I survived the biggest sea monster in the world? The truth is, the Kraken was never a lie. It was the truth told by men with vivid imaginations, and slightly too much rum. But thanks to them, the world gained a legend that still makes the ocean feel a little more dangerous than it really is. 3. Amazon warrior women were real. If you think the female warriors of Greek mythology were just a fantasy, you might want to rewrite everything you know about history. Because they were real, and they were nothing like the delicate heroines from romance movies. The ancient Greeks believed in a tribe of women called the Amazons, who lived apart from men, rode horses, fired arrows, and crushed anyone foolish enough to challenge them. For centuries, scholars dismissed the story as a metaphor for strong women, not an account of real people. Then archaeology came along and ruined that theory. When scientists excavated ancient burial mounds across the steppes of Siberia and Ukraine, they found the remains of women buried with bows, swords, and armor. Some showed healed battle wounds. They weren't victims. They were true warriors, part of the Scythians, the nomadic horsemen who once terrified Greece itself. Picture it. A muscular Greek soldier raises his shield, only for a braided-haired rider to gallop forward, draw her bow, and strike before he can even say, "Ugh!" That kind of shock easily turns into legend. The truth is, the Amazons weren't mythical. They were real women who lived and died on the battlefield like any other fighter. The Greeks simply did what humans always do, retell the truth with a little fear and a whole lot of awe. 4. Atlantis and the real-life apocalypse of Thera. You've probably heard of Atlantis, the legendary island so wealthy and advanced that the gods grew jealous and drowned it beneath the sea. It's one of the most famous stories never been proven true. But here's the twist. It might have really happened. For thousands of years, people believed Plato invented Atlantis as a moral lesson. An arrogant empire, far ahead of its time, swallowed by the ocean in a single day. It sounded more like philosophy than history, right? But then archaeologists started asking, what about the volcano of Thera? Around 1600 years before Christ, the volcano Thera, modern-day Santorini, erupted with such force that it tore the island apart. Ash clouds reached the stratosphere, tsunamis swept across the Mediterranean, and the mighty Minoan civilization suddenly vanished. Sound familiar? An advanced island culture, erased by the sea in a single day. Plato might have heard this story passed down through generations, and added a touch of Hollywood flair. The funny thing is, if you visit Santorini today, you'll find thousands of tourists sipping cocktails right on the edge of that very crater. Most have no idea they're sitting on what could be the real evidence of Atlantis. Maybe the ancients were half right. The island did exist, it's just selling sunset tours now. So perhaps Atlantis wasn't pure legend after all. It was a distorted memory of a real catastrophe, a time when the sea reminded humanity that when Earth decides to reset, it doesn't ask for permission. 5. Archimedes' death ray. If you think ancient science was just men in togas counting pebbles, hold on, because one man named Archimedes once tried to build a death ray. Yes, a weapon that could burn enemy ships using nothing but sunlight. In other words, he was the original Iron Man. In a dress. According to legend, when Rome besieged the city of Syracuse, Archimedes, the mathematician and dangerously curious genius, came up with a way to destroy the Roman fleet without spilling a drop of blood. He arranged dozens of polished bronze mirrors to catch and concentrate the sunlight onto the advancing ships. The result? They burst into flames. At least that's how the story goes. For centuries, historians dismissed it as myth, a piece of ancient Greek fanfiction. But in modern times, scientists and even the show Mythbusters decided to test it. The results were surprising. Under perfect conditions, reflected sunlight can actually ignite wood. No lasers, no magic, just math, physics, and a whole lot of Mediterranean sunshine. Now picture this. You're a Roman soldier rowing toward the enemy, when suddenly the sunlight flashes in your face and your ship starts smoking. You'd probably think you'd been cursed, not outsmarted by a geometry problem. Maybe Archimedes didn't really burn down an entire fleet, but the idea proved something timeless. When smart people have too much free time, the world should be nervous. And yes, sometimes the legend of the death ray isn't as far from reality as it sounds. 6. Caligula's floating party palaces. If you think the luxury parties of the ultra-rich today are over the top, then you haven't met Emperor Caligula, the man who turned extravagance into an Olympic sport. And get this, he built 2 gigantic ships just to throw parties, not boats, floating palaces. Caligula, the Roman emperor famous for being more unhinged than any documentary could capture, decided solid ground was too boring for royal celebrations. So he ordered the construction of 2 massive ships on Lake Nemi, decorated with marble floors, gold ornaments, heated baths, plumbing systems, and even live entertainment stages. If social media had existed back then, he'd have been trending under the hashtag YOLO on the lake. For nearly 2,000 years, historians dismissed it as gossip, because who would be crazy enough to build luxury villas that float? But in the 1920s, when engineers drained Lake Nemi, the truth emerged. 2 colossal ships, almost the size of football fields, featuring engineering so advanced that modern architects had to admit ancient Rome outdid them. Unfortunately, these ancient superyachts were destroyed during World War II, but the remains proved one thing. Caligula wasn't just insane. He had taste. Sure, he blew through Rome's tax money to fund his parties, but at least he did it in style. The legend of Caligula's floating party palaces is no myth. He truly pulled off what billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk might still be dreaming of, except Caligula didn't need rockets or space. Just a lake, a little sunlight, and enough wine to turn an empire into one endless afterparty. 7. The Antikythera mechanism, the ancient computer. If you think ancient Greeks just wore white robes and philosophized about life, you should know they once built a computer. Not a stone tablet with equations, but an actual mechanical device with gears, precision dials, and the ability to calculate the movements of the sun, the moon, and even the Olympic calendar. The story began in 1901, when a group of Greek sponge divers discovered a pile of corroded bronze in a shipwreck near the island of Antikythera. At first, they thought it was a broken statue, but when archaeologists examined it, they found dozens of intricate gears meshed together inside. It was so complex that no one believed it could have been made over 2,000 years ago. The device, now known as the Antikythera mechanism, is considered humanity's first analog computer. It could predict eclipses, track celestial events, and mark upcoming Olympic Games. In other words, the Greeks basically built an ancient Apple Watch, powered by a hand crank. It took modern scientists more than a century, along with X-rays and 3D modeling, to figure out how it worked. In other words, we needed computers to decode the computers of the ancients. A little humbling, isn't it? If someone had traveled back in time and accidentally dropped their laptop into the Mediterranean, this would be the proof. And if not, then it just shows how terrifyingly brilliant the Greeks really were. They calculated the universe, while we calculate whether Netflix has something new to watch. 8. The poison damsels of India. You've probably heard the saying, women are the most dangerous weapon. In ancient India, that wasn't a metaphor. They really trained women to kill, with their own bodies. Sounds like a spy movie plot, but this one's pure, lethal history. According to legend, during the Mauryan Empire, there existed a group of women known as the Vishakanya, literally, the poison maidens. From childhood, they were given tiny doses of venom until their bodies built complete immunity. The result? Their blood, sweat, and even their kiss could kill a man. Yes, one kiss, and you were on your way to meet the gods. For centuries, people dismissed it as poetic exaggeration, the idea of a femme fatale turned myth. But ancient Indian texts and Mauryan medical records actually mention them as tools of political assassination. A smile could mean a greeting, or a death sentence, depending on which side you were on. Picture this. You're the king's rival, raising your cup in celebration. The woman beside you smiles softly, touches your lips, and bam! Credits roll. No dagger, no poisoned wine, because she was the poison. Today, when people talk about a toxic relationship, they usually mean too many texts or too much drama. But in ancient India, it was a literal life-or-death situation. So the next time you think you've had a bad date, remember, at least you lived to tell the story. 9. The real-life Pied Piper of Hamelin. If a stranger dressed in bright colors showed up at your door, playing a flute and promising to take care of your rat problem, would you let him in? The villagers of Hamelin, Germany did, and they lost all their children because of it. Yes, this fairy tale actually happened, and the ending was anything but happy. Everyone knows the legend of the Pied Piper, the man who lured rats out of the village, then returned to lead all the children away when he wasn't paid. For centuries, people treated it as a moral fable about greed. But the tragedy of Hamelin was real. Old records from the 14th century describe that on June 26, 1284, 130 children from Hamelin vanished without a trace. No one knew where they went, and there's no evidence of any rats or a flute player. Some historians believe they were victims of disease or perhaps taken during a mass migration. Whatever the reason, the disappearance truly happened, and the town still marks that date in its chronicles. So who was the Pied Piper? Maybe he symbolized death, or someone who led the children away during a catastrophe. But if a real man ever played a tune that made an entire crowd of kids follow him, then congratulations. He was the scariest DJ of the Middle Ages. The story of the Pied Piper isn't just a myth. It's a haunting melody of loss, a song that made people dance, and erased a village's future in silence. 10. Stone Age brain surgery. If you think going to the dentist is the worst experience imaginable, try living in the Stone Age, where your doctor's idea of treatment involved picking up a sharp rock and saying, "Don't worry, I'm just going to drill a hole in your skull." Yes, prehistoric humans performed brain surgery, and the most shocking part is that many of their patients actually survived. The procedure was called trepanation, the act of drilling, cutting, or scraping a hole into the skull. It sounds more like torture than medicine, but archaeological evidence proves it was a real surgery practiced thousands of years ago. Many Stone Age skulls found in Europe, South America, and Africa show neat circular openings with signs of bone regrowth, meaning the patients not only survived but recovered. So why did they do it? Some researchers believe it was to relieve pressure after head injuries. Others think it was a spiritual ritual to release evil spirits, a blend of theology and early medicine. Whatever the reason, the fact that anyone lived through it using flint tools is nothing short of miraculous. Now imagine this. You have a headache, go to your local healer, and he says, "Relax, I've got a special rock for that," then pulls out a hand-sized stone and starts grinding. No anesthesia, no sterile gauze, just confidence and screaming. It's hard to believe, But brain surgery wasn't invented by modern science. Our ancestors did it with nothing but instinct and stone, and somehow it worked. So next time you complain about a painful injection, remember, at least no one's opening your skull with a rock. 11. The Lost City Beneath the Sea, Heraklion. If you think cities buried under the sea exist only in cartoons like Atlantis or The Little Mermaid, get ready for a surprise, because the ancient Egyptians actually had one. And no, it wasn't sunk by magic. It went down thanks to gravity and a spectacularly bad construction decision. The story begins with Heraklion, also known as Thonis, a thriving port city at the mouth of the Nile. It was once the main gateway of ancient Egypt, where ships from across the Mediterranean arrived loaded with gold, statues of gods, and plenty of wine, because no great civilization ever skipped happy hour. But around the 2nd century before Christ, the city vanished, as if erased from existence. For thousands of years, people thought Heraklion was just a myth, until the year 2000, when French archaeologist Frank Gaudiot discovered an entire city lying deep beneath the waters of Abu Qir Bay. Under layers of silt, they found massive temples, 5-meter-tall statues of pharaohs, ancient ships, and hundreds of perfectly preserved artifacts. Turns out the city had literally sunk when the soft ground beneath it collapsed. A historic-level architectural fail. It's kind of ironic. The same civilization that built pyramids strong enough to stand for 4,000 years managed to lose an entire city to a bad foundation. Today, Heraklion has become the world's largest underwater museum, a place where you can dive in and take selfies with ancient gods. So the next time someone says Atlantis isn't real, just tell them, that's fine. Egypt already made a copy. 12. The Vikings who reached America first. If you still think Christopher Columbus was the first to discover America, I'm sorry, but he was just the guy who showed up late and still got the trophy. Because nearly 500 years earlier, the Vikings had already set foot on American soil, and in true Viking fashion, they definitely didn't come just to sightsee. Norse sagas tell of Leif Erikson, the son of Eric the Red, who sailed from Greenland to a distant, fertile land full of wood and fish, a place they called Vinland. For centuries, people assumed it was just a drunken boast from men who loved their mead and tall tales. But in the 1960s, Norwegian archaeologists Helge and Anne Ingstad proved otherwise. They discovered the remains of a Viking settlement at Lance aux Meadows in Newfoundland, Canada, complete with wooden longhouses, iron forges, and artifacts unmistakably Norse. Radiocarbon dating placed it around the year 1000. In other words, when Columbus wasn't even born yet, the Vikings had already landed, explored, and probably complained about the mosquitoes. Even more fascinating, Norse records describe the locals as dark-skinned, black-haired, and quick on their feet, clearly referring to the indigenous peoples of North America. That means the two worlds actually met, before the Vikings decided this new land was just a bit too far from their favorite taverns. So next time someone says Columbus discovered America, you can smile and reply, actually, the blonde guys with beer mugs got here first. They just forgot to make a vlog about it. 13. The real-life treasure of Captain Kidd. If you've ever dreamed of digging up a real pirate's treasure, here's some good news. Once in history, someone actually did. And the man behind it was none other than the legendary pirate Captain William Kidd, the name that made every adventure-loving kid shout, "Aye, aye, Captain." According to legend, before being captured and executed in London in 1701, Kidd buried a massive fortune on a secret island. For centuries, that rumor sent everyone from nobles to scholars to shovel-wielding dreamers racing to find it, each hoping to uncover the fabled El Dorado of the seas. But here's the twist. Kidd's treasure really existed, and it wasn't found with a map marked by an X. Before his arrest, he had entrusted his gold, silver, and precious goods to the owner of Gardiner's Island off the coast of New York for safekeeping. After Kidd's execution, the British authorities seized everything. The haul weighed hundreds of pounds, filled with gold, silver, and fine silk. A real treasure, just not for him. So yes, Captain Kidd was real. His treasure was real. He just didn't get to spend it. As for the treasure hunters who kept searching for 3 centuries, they were a few hundred years late, because the British government had already cashed in back in 1701. It just goes to show, sometimes you don't need pirates for plunder. Taxes do the job just fine. And if Kidd could see it from his grave, he'd probably sigh, "I wasn't executed for piracy. I was punished for trusting the wrong people." 14. The Lost Legion that ended up in China. If you think Roman soldiers only fought around Europe, prepare to be stunned, because there's evidence suggesting a lost Roman legion somehow wandered all the way to China. No joke. This might be one of the strangest stories history has ever told, and it begins with a crushing defeat. In 53 before Christ, the Roman Empire went to war against the Parthians in the Battle of Carrhae and was utterly destroyed. More than 10,000 Roman soldiers were captured alive. According to Roman records, they vanished without a trace. But Chinese chronicles written decades later tell of a strange army encountered on the western frontier, men wearing metal armor, fighting in tight formations shaped like fish scales. That's the Roman testudo formation, unmistakable even halfway across the world. Those soldiers were reportedly captured and resettled in a remote region called Lygian, near the Gobi Desert. They were given land, married local women, and over generations became part of ancient Chinese society. Thousands of years later, genetic studies found that residents of modern-day Liqian in Gansu province carry unusually high levels of European DNA, light hair, blue eyes, and sharp noses, right in the heart of China. It sounds like historical science fiction, but both the records and the DNA point to one conclusion. A lost Roman legion ended up living out its days in Asia. This story proves one thing. The ancient world wasn't small. People just didn't know how to read the map. And somewhere out there, in the sands of the Gobi, descendants of those soldiers might still be walking around. Romans by blood, Chinese by home, eating noodles instead of bread. 15. The City of the Dead, London's real-life ghost train. You think passenger trains are ordinary? In Victorian London, they had trains for the dead. That's right, a real railway line built to carry the deceased and their families on one final journey. Sounds like the plot of a horror film, but this was 100% real history. By the mid-19th century, London faced a grim problem. Too many corpses. The city's graveyards were overflowing, bodies stacked upon bodies. So the authorities came up with a solution. Build a massive cemetery outside the city called Brookwood Cemetery and connect it by rail. The result was the London Necropolis Railway, a train service dedicated entirely to funerals. Here's the funny part. Even death had ticket classes. First class was for the wealthy, both living and deceased, while third class was for the common folk. The departure station was right in the heart of London, at Waterloo, a name that feels a little too on the nose for a final destination. Inside the train, everything was proper and dignified. There were separate carriages for coffins, for mourners, and even a tea counter, because the British might grieve, but they would never skip tea time. The railway ran for nearly a century before the modern world finally made the idea of corpse transport by train seem less fashionable. Today, the remnants of the station still lie beneath London's busy streets, a quiet reminder that in this city, you can catch a train to anywhere, even the afterlife. Truly, a ghost train that ran more punctually than most tourist ones do today. 16. The City of Sodom and the Meteor that Ended It. You probably think the story from the Bible about Sodom and Gomorrah, two sinful cities destroyed by fire from the sky, is just a moral metaphor. Maybe it is, but it turns out something really did explode there. And it wasn't divine wrath, it was cosmic. Archaeologists excavating the site of Tal el-Hammam in Jordan, believed by many to be the location of ancient Sodom, uncovered evidence of a massive meteor explosion about 3,600 years ago. The heat was intense enough to melt pottery, vaporize bricks, and incinerate everything alive within miles. In short, it was the Bronze Age version of Hiroshima. Even more terrifying, soil samples show everything was flash-cooked in an instant, consistent with an airburst, when a meteor explodes in the atmosphere before hitting the ground. The resulting shockwave created winds thousands of degrees hot, obliterating the city in seconds. If you had lived there, it wouldn't have mattered who was a sinner. You'd barely have time to shout, "Oh my God," before the credits rolled. As for the ancient people, they didn't know about meteors, so naturally they concluded that the gods were angry. And so, a natural disaster turned into a divine warning retold for thousands of years. In other words, maybe Sodom wasn't punished by heaven, but by space. And honestly, if a giant rock from the sky falls on your head, the reason behind it doesn't really matter anymore. 17. The amazingly real sea serpent. If you've ever looked at those old maps showing giant sea snakes swallowing ships and thought who would believe this stuff, well, turns out they had a pretty good reason. Because the so-called sea monster from legend was real. And the funniest part is, it looked even weirder than anyone imagined. For thousands of years, sailors around the world told stories of enormous creatures rising from the waves, twisting like serpents, then disappearing into the deep. Some said they had fiery red manes. Others swore they were as long as entire ships. Most people assumed it was a seasick hallucination, until modern science identified the culprit, the oarfish, also known as the ocean dragon. This creature can grow up to 11 meters long, thin as a ribbon, with a bright red dorsal fin running down its entire body. When it swims near the surface, its glowing silver scales and rippling red fin make it look exactly like a massive serpent undulating through the water. And when it's dying, it often drifts to the surface, floating eerily like it just wanted to give humanity one last scare. Over centuries, every sailor who saw an oarfish retold the story, adding a few extra meters, a little more terror, and a lot more drama. By the time it passed through generations, that poor fish had evolved into a full-blown ship-eating monster. The truth is, the sea serpent wasn't a monster at all, just a very long, very awkward fish with terrible timing. But if you ever find yourself at sea and see something long, red, and wiggling toward you, remember, don't panic. Just start swimming, really fast. 18. The ancient computer that predicted the future. Do you think only modern people have advanced technology? Get ready for a shock. More than 2,000 years ago, the ancient Greeks built a device that could predict eclipses, track lunar cycles, and even announce the next Olympic Games. In other words, they made a bronze version of Google Calendar. In 1901, a group of Greek sponge divers found a lump of corroded metal in a shipwreck near the island of Antikythera. At first, everyone thought it was just scrap, but when scientists ran X-rays on it, they nearly spilled their coffee. Inside were more than 30 precision gears stacked together like an ancient Swiss watch. This device, now called the Antikythera mechanism, could calculate planetary movements, predict solar and lunar eclipses, and even track Greek sporting events. It sounds like science fiction, but it's completely real. It took modern researchers 100 years and advanced X-ray imaging to finally understand how it worked. 2,000 years later, and we still need computers to decode their computer. Some scholars call it humanity's first analog computer. The rest of us can only say, seriously, how did they not invent Wi-Fi while they were at it? What's truly mind-blowing isn't just its accuracy, but the mystery of its disappearance. After the Antikythera mechanism, the world forgot how to build anything remotely like it for over 1,000 years. Maybe the Greeks got too busy philosophizing about life and forgot to hit save on the blueprints. So next time you feel proud for mastering Excel, remember, Aristotle's people basically did it 2 millennia before you, using bronze gears and pure genius. 19. The real Moby Dick, the whale that fought back. If you think Moby Dick was just a fictional tale about a giant whale haunting a ship captain, here's the bad news. It was real, and the real one was even meaner. Its name was Mocha Dick, and instead of being hunted, it was the hunter. In the 19th century, during the golden age of whaling, sailors told stories of a massive white whale off the coast of Chile, scarred like it wore armor and holding one serious grudge. While most whales fled from harpoons, Mocha Dick charged straight at ships, smashing decks apart and tossing sailors like baseballs. Witnesses said he survived dozens of harpoon attacks, then came back for revenge. When writer Herman Melville heard these accounts, he turned them into Moby Dick, toning it down just a little, and only a little. In reality, Mocha Dick wasn't a legend but a fact, recorded in maritime reports from 1839. And yes, they eventually killed him, but not before he destroyed more than a few ships. Picture it. You're a sailor shouting orders, and the massive whale suddenly turns, gives you that look. Oh, so you thought you were hunting me? That was the moment everyone realized the ocean had its own final boss. And the greatest irony? Humans hunted whales for oil to light their lamps. The whale hunted them back and turned the lights out. Mocha Dick wasn't a myth. He was proof that sometimes nature fights back, and it doesn't miss. 20. The oracle bones that proved a dynasty was real. If you think ancient China was all legends, flying dragons, mythical kings, and dynasties that sounded too good to be true, here's the twist. One of those so-called mythical dynasties actually existed, and we know it because of something called oracle bones. In the late 19th century, Chinese herbal doctors sold a powder called dragon bones, said to cure all kinds of illnesses. One day, a scholar noticed strange carvings on some of those bones, markings that looked like ancient writing. When he examined them closely, he realized they weren't dragon bones at all, but turtle shells and ox shoulder blades engraved with questions for the gods. Things like, will it rain tomorrow or should the king go to war? These artifacts became known as oracle bones, and they came from the Shang dynasty, a dynasty historians had long dismissed as legend. Once translated, the inscriptions revealed names of kings, rituals, and events that matched ancient records perfectly. In other words, the people of old weren't making things up. They were just writing their history on turtle shells. Picture this: priests carving questions into bones, heating them until they crack, then reading the fracture lines like a celestial forecast. It was the ancient version of Siri, only instead of saying, "Hey Siri," they said, "Hey spirits." And so, thanks to a batch of so-called dragon bone medicine, an entire forgotten dynasty rose again from the past. Sometimes, history isn't found in textbooks. It's sitting on the shelf of a neighborhood apothecary. 21. The Gladiator. Women of ancient Rome. You probably picture Roman gladiators as sweaty, muscle-bound men shouting in the Colosseum, right? Well, surprise, Roman women fought there too. They wielded swords, wore helmets, and battled just like the men did. Yes, female gladiators were real, and they made the crowd scream even louder. For centuries, historians thought the idea of a gladiatrix, a woman gladiator, was pure exaggeration. After all, who would let noble ladies swing swords in an arena? But archaeology had other plans. In the year 2000, a burial site was found in London containing a full gladiator's kit, sword, armor, and pottery depicting combat scenes, and the person buried there was a woman. Ancient carvings and Roman records also describe women fighting duels, even facing wild animals, before roaring audiences. Some of them became famous enough to earn titles and statues in their honor, something almost unheard of in that era. Just imagine a Roman general cheering from the stands, only to realize the victor in the arena is a woman. He's probably clapping awkwardly, thinking, do I applaud or surrender? The truth is, these women didn't just exist. They proved Rome could turn anything into entertainment, even gender equality through blood and sand. So if you think girl power is a modern trend, sorry, the Roman girls did it first. They just happened to bring real swords. 22. The prehistoric unicorn. The furry tank of the Ice Age. If you've ever dreamed of a white unicorn prancing through meadows, glowing under rainbows, and breathing joy into the world, sorry. The truth is far less magical. The real unicorn once existed, but it looked more like a gym-obsessed rhino covered in fur, weighing 4 tons, and capable of launching you into orbit with a single charge. Its scientific name was Elasmotherium sibericum, better known as the Siberian unicorn. It lived across Central Asia tens of thousands of years ago, sporting a massive horn jutting straight from its forehead. The likely source of the unicorn legends that spread through Europe and Asia. To prehistoric humans, spotting a giant, shaggy beast the size of a bus charging through the fog must have felt like witnessing a holy creature. But as the story passed down through generations, people dropped the parts about mud, noise, and terror, added a sprinkle of magic, and just like that, the hulking rhino turned into a graceful creature of purity and light. Later, scientists uncovered fossils in Kazakhstan and Siberia, confirming the species' existence. The real unicorn walked the earth. It just didn't fly, grant wishes, or sparkle. In the end, the unicorn perfectly shows how humans turn ugly truths into beautiful myths. We saw a hairy monster and told ourselves it was magic. Maybe legends don't lie. They just come with better filters than Instagram. 23. The Lost City of the Monkey God. If you've ever watched Indiana Jones and thought lost cities of gold were just Hollywood fantasy, think again. Because deep in the jungles of Honduras, there really was a vanished city so mysterious, people called it the City of the Monkey God. And no, there wasn't an actual Monkey King, but the story is every bit as wild as the movies. For centuries, explorers told tales of a hidden city buried somewhere in the dense Musquitia rainforest of Central America, filled with gold, silver, and guarded by a monkey-headed deity. Locals called it Ciudad Blanca, the White City. Every expedition sent to find it either came back empty-handed or didn't come back at all. Eventually, people dismissed it as a myth, a jungle fairy tale told to lure fools into getting lost. Then in 2012, everything changed. A research team used LiDAR, laser scanning technology from the air, to map the terrain. When the data appeared, jaws dropped. Beneath the thick canopy lay the remains of a massive city, plazas, pyramids, canals, and hundreds of structures untouched for over 500 years. When archaeologists finally reached the site, they discovered stone statues depicting humans, animals, and yes, monkey faces carved into ceremonial masks, exactly as the legend described. The city of the monkey god was real after all. It had just been swallowed by time and trees. The funniest part? The same skeptics who once laughed at the story are now booking flights to Honduras to see it for themselves. History proved, once again, that just because you haven't found something doesn't mean it isn't there. Sometimes it's simply hiding, waiting for you to swat a few jungle mosquitoes first. 24. The battle that history lied about. The Song of Roland. You know those epic movies where the hero dies gloriously in battle, defeating impossible odds before falling in a blaze of honor? Well, there's a real story like that in history. But the truth is, he didn't die fighting an army of villains. He died because the locals were mad at him. The legend of Roland, the great knight of Charlemagne, says he and his men were ambushed at Roncevaux Pass by 400,000 Saracen warriors. Roland fought bravely to his last breath, blew his horn for help, and became France's national symbol of heroism. The tale was so inspiring, it became the Song of Roland, one of Europe's most famous epics. The problem? There were no Saracens. The real battle of Roncevaux in 778 wasn't against Muslims, it was against the Basques, local mountain tribes in northern Spain. Charlemagne had just sacked their capital, and when his army retreated, the Basques ambushed the rear guard to get revenge. Roland just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. In other words, the brave hero who died for his empire was actually a soldier beaten up by angry villagers. But since Charlemagne couldn't admit that, the story got a little revision. The massacre became a noble sacrifice, and history got itself a hero. Ironically, that glorified version went on to inspire 1,000 years of songs, poems, and paintings about courage and loyalty, proving that with the right soundtrack, even a loss can sound like victory. So if anyone ever twists your story, don't take it personally. Charlemagne did the same, and they still put him in the textbooks. 25. The hidden chamber inside the Great Pyramid. If you think that after thousands of years, humanity has uncovered every secret of the Great Pyramid of Giza, think again. In 2017, scientists discovered that inside the pyramid, there's still a massive hidden chamber that no one knew existed. Yes, even after 45 centuries, this monument still has room for surprises. For millennia, treasure hunters, scholars, and archaeologists have crawled through every tunnel searching for the mythical chamber of ancient wisdom. Everyone thought the pyramid had given up all its secrets until an international research team used muon tomography, a cosmic particle-based scanning method similar to X-rays, to examine the entire structure. What they found left them speechless. A void more than 30 meters long, buried deep inside, directly above the Grand Gallery. No one knows what the chamber was for. Some believe it was a secondary burial hall, others think it was a passage for the pharaoh's soul, and a few jokingly call it the world's first Airbnb suite. Whatever it was, it proved the Great Pyramid still isn't done with us. What's astonishing is that the Egyptians built a 6 million-ton masterpiece, placed every stone with millimeter precision, and didn't leave a single note explaining how. They could do that, while most of us can't remember where we wrote down the Wi-Fi password. So the next time you feel proud for assembling an IKEA shelf without messing up, just remember, the ancient Egyptians hid an entire room inside a 4,000-year-old pyramid, and no one noticed for millennia. 26. The real-life Amazons, women who fought like warriors. You probably think the Amazons, those fierce women from Greek mythology and Wonder Woman movies, were just fantasy. Sorry, but they were real. And they didn't just shoot arrows, they rode horses, swung swords, and made the men of their time seriously nervous. Ancient Greeks told stories of a tribe of women who lived north of the Black Sea, warriors who shunned men, fought like gods, and even removed one breast to improve their aim. For centuries, scholars dismissed it as myth, probably something a few male philosophers made up during a long dinner debate about gender equality. Then archaeology pulled a plot twist. Excavations of Scythian burial sites, nomadic people from the Eurasian steppes, revealed graves filled with weapons, bows, swords, spears, and even armor. Many of the skeletons were female, some showing healed battle wounds. These weren't ornaments. They were proof these women fought for real. The Amazons weren't mythical at all. They were true warriors, expert horse archers who lived hard, traveled light, and fought side by side with men. Think of them as the ancient version of special forces, only without radios, just horses, grit, and the attitude of "don't mess with me." What's fascinating is that the Greeks feared them yet couldn't stop admiring them. They carved statues, painted vases, and wrote poetry about them, half terrified, half in awe. In the end, the Amazon myth wasn't fiction. It was history told with a bit of salt and a touch of male insecurity. 27. The brain surgery of the Stone Age. You might think modern medicine invented brain surgery, but picture this. Thousands of years ago, a Stone Age hunter pinned you down, picked up a sharp rock, and said, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." Terrifying? Yes. But somehow, many of his patients actually survived. Archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of prehistoric skulls with neatly drilled circular holes, too precise to be accidental. At first, experts thought they were part of spiritual rituals, like opening a doorway for evil spirits to escape. But a closer look revealed something incredible: bone regrowth around the holes, meaning the patients lived long enough to heal. The procedure, called trepanation, involved cutting, scraping, or drilling a hole into the skull to treat everything from epilepsy and migraines to, apparently, being haunted. The tools: flint blades, sharpened bones, or anything hard enough to get the job done. No anesthesia, no sterilization, just courage and maybe a touch of insanity. Imagine living in the Stone Age, your head pounding and your neighbor cheerfully saying, "Let me drill that for you, you'll feel better tomorrow." And somehow, sometimes, it worked. Survival rates were as high as 70%, suggesting early humans understood intracranial pressure long before MRI scans or medical degrees existed. So next time you complain that your doctor made you flinch, remember, at least they aren't using rocks. The people of the Stone Age didn't have painkillers, but they did have faith, and apparently a very busy guardian angel. 28. The floating palaces of Emperor Caligula. You've probably heard of Caligula, the famously mad Roman emperor who planned to make his horse a senator and partied like there was no tomorrow. But his wildest move wasn't political, it was architectural. He built 2 floating palaces on a lake. No joke. Caligula commissioned massive ships on Lake Nemi just so he could throw parties in the middle of the water. According to ancient records, Caligula ordered 2 colossal vessels, each more than 70 meters long, equipped with every luxury imaginable: marble floors, hot and cold plumbing, even golden bathtubs. Their sole purpose? To serve as floating resorts where he could drink, feast, and indulge in activities that polite historians tend to skip over. While ordinary Romans labored under the sun, their emperor was literally chilling on a 5-star cruise. For nearly 2,000 years, most believed the story was pure exaggeration, a myth about a deranged ruler. But in the 1930s, when engineers partially drained Lake Nemi, the truth surfaced. 2 enormous ships, so large and advanced that modern engineers could hardly believe they were built in the 1st century. Tragically, both ships were destroyed during World War II, but replicas and recovered parts still leave visitors speechless. Caligula, it turns out, wasn't just insane. He was a secret engineering prodigy. In the end, he was the kind of man who could bankrupt an empire just to prove one point: my house can float. And honestly, who wouldn't want an invitation to that party? 29. The real-life assassins, killers with a code. If you've ever played Assassin's Creed and thought it was all fiction, brace yourself. The real assassins actually existed, and they were far more terrifying than the game. But instead of leaping off rooftops and hiding in haystacks, these killers preferred to strike in broad daylight. The story begins in the 11th century, in the mountains of the Middle East. A small Shia Muslim sect known as the Nizari Ismailis, led by their enigmatic founder Hassan-i Sabah, established a fortress at Alamut in Iran. There, he trained an elite group of warriors called the Fidai, meaning those who sacrifice themselves. Their mission wasn't to fight wars, but to eliminate kings, generals, and political rivals, always up close, often in public, and always with precision. Terrified enemies couldn't comprehend their fearlessness, so they spread a rumor that the killers were drugged with hashish to dull their fear of death, giving rise to the word assassin. In truth, these men weren't drugged at all. They were master strategists and early experts in psychological warfare, using stealth and devotion to spread fear through entire empires. Imagine waking up one morning as a medieval lord, only to find a dagger stuck in your pillow with a note that says, "Next time, it goes in your chest." You'd start behaving yourself real quick. For centuries, the mere mention of the Hashashin sent rulers into panic. They were real assassins, not gamers or legends, but the original professionals who made stealth and strategy an art form long before the word ever hit a loading screen. 30. Atlantis, the lost civilization that might have been real. You know that classic story about a wealthy, advanced city swallowed by the ocean overnight? Sounds like the trailer for Aquaman, right? But here's the crazy part. Atlantis might have actually existed, and the force that destroyed it wasn't divine wrath, but a volcanic explosion so massive it rewrote history. According to the philosopher Plato, Atlantis was a mighty island empire blessed with wealth and power before being wiped out by the gods' anger. For thousands of years, people assumed it was just a moral parable with a touch of ancient Hollywood flair, but modern science uncovered something that fits the story a little too well: the eruption of the Thera volcano, today's Santorini, in Greece around 3,600 years ago. That eruption was one of the largest natural disasters in human history. It blew out the center of the island, leaving behind a vast crater, and unleashed tsunamis tens of meters high that obliterated the nearby Minoan civilization on Crete, an advanced culture of art, trade, and architecture that suddenly vanished. The sound of that explosion could have echoed for thousands of kilometers. To the people who survived it, watching the ground shake, the sea boil, and the sky turn black, it must have seemed like divine punishment. Over time, memory became myth, and the legend of Atlantis was born. Not magic, just a human attempt to explain the impossible. Ironically, humanity hasn't learned much since. We still build houses beside volcanoes and take selfies during storms. Maybe, just maybe, the last words of Atlantis were something like, "Don't worry, it's just a little smoke."